All right, part 3 of solving multi-step equations. So in the last one we looked at one-step equations. So now we're going to look at two-step equations. So we're ratcheting it up a bit. Okay, so when there is more than one thing happening to a variable, we want to make sure that we pay attention to the order of things. So order matters. Okay? We must undo what is happening to the variable in the opposite order that it is happening. So a good metaphor for this is taking off your socks and shoes. Even though you put the socks on first in the morning and then the second thing you put on was the shoes, you must take them off in reverse order. By taking off your shoes, then taking off your socks. So for equations that have 2 steps or even 3 steps or more, the idea is exactly the same. So what we want to do is determine what is happening to the variable in what order. Then we can make a plan to undo what is happening in the reverse order. So taking off our shoes, then taking off our socks. Okay? So this is a little different, but I think it's a helpful way to think about equations. So let's do some practicing with this. Determine what is happening to the variable in what order, and then describe what needs to be done to undo what is happening. Then use your plan to actually solve the equation. So let me show you what I mean. So we have an example here, and then the first thing we want to do is figure out what is happening to the variable in what order. Okay, so here is our variable, x. There are 2 things happening to this x, and we're only focusing on one side of the equation right now, just this part, okay? So by order of operations, the first thing that's happening to that x is we are multiplying by 3. That's this thing right here. Multiplying comes first before addition. But that is the second thing that we're going to do. So the second thing that's happening to this variable is after it gets multiplied by 3, we're adding 5. Okay, so we can see what's happening to the variable. You can also kind of imagine what you would do if you were going to plug in a number, like 3 times 2 plus 5, right? This is basically PEMDAS, right? Order of operations. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Parentheses, exponents, multiplying, dividing, addition, subtraction, right? You've learned this before. Okay, so when we go ahead and solve it, we need to reverse the order and use opposite operations. So how do we undo what is happening? Well, to undo it, the first thing that we are going to do is the opposite of the second thing. So imagine that this is putting on your socks and this is putting on your shoes. So in the morning, that's the order that you put things on. But now we're taking things off. So we have to take off the shoes first. So the opposite, or the taking off of the shoes of adding 5, would be to subtract 5. Then the second thing we need to do is the opposite of the first thing. We need to take off our socks. And so we're multiplying by 3, so instead let's divide by 3. So that gives us a strategy to solve. So let's actually try it out. These are the things I'm actually going to do. I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides first. That's going to go away. We get 3x equals negative 6. Then, so I did this. I did the first step. Now I'm going to have to divide by 3. Divide by 3, divide by 3. X is equal to negative 2. And there's our answer. And we can plug it in and check. 3 times negative 2 plus 5. Does that equal negative 1? Well, that's negative 6 plus 5. And yes, that does equal negative 1. Okay, let's try another one. If you feel comfortable, go ahead and pause the video and try doing the second one, the second row, all by yourself. If you still need some help, Let's give it a try together. Alright, so the first thing that's happening to this time the variable is y is we're multiplying by a negative 2. Multiply by negative 2. And I use parentheses here because if I just write like this, it can sometimes look like I'm subtracting 2. That's not what's happening. Second thing that's happening is we're subtracting 3 right here. So we need to reverse that in the opposite order. So first, the opposite of subtracting 2 is adding 3. Not subtracting 2. Subtracting 3 is adding 3. Second, the opposite of multiplying by negative 2 is dividing by negative 2. Notice I didn't change the sign. It's still negative. Okay? Because multiplying by negative 2 and dividing by negative 2 are opposites. Alright, so let's actually solve it now. So the first thing I'm going to do is add 3 to both sides. Okay, second thing I'm going to do is divide by negative 2 to both sides. Cancels. Y equals negative 7. Okay, go ahead and try a couple more on your own. And then when you're ready, unpause the video and see if you got them right. So pause the video, give some tries, and see if you're right. Okay, let's see how you did. Alright, for our third example here, first we were dividing by 3, then we were subtracting 1. So we need to add 1 and then multiply by 3. Remember, the key idea here is that we're undoing this first and then we're undoing that second. So reverse order. So if we do that, we add 1 to both sides and then we multiply by 3 to both sides, you get x equals 9. Okay, the next one had a little bit of a tricky element here. This negative is like multiplying by a negative 1. And so that might be a little tricky for you guys. Then it was adding 2. So the opposite of adding 2 is subtracting 2. And then the opposite of multiplying by a negative 1 is dividing by a negative 1. So we subtract 2 from both sides, and then we divide by negative 1. So we get x equals negative 5. The last one was going to be the most challenging. X is being multiplied not by 4, but I want you to think of this as a negative 4. Okay? Subtracting is really just a negative number in there. So the first thing that's happening is we were multiplying by a negative. And even though the order is a little out of order, we are adding 3. The 3 is a positive. We're not subtracting 3. Okay, if it helps, you can rearrange these two things as negative 4x plus 3. You can switch things that are subtracting as long as you keep the sign. So this negative goes with the 4 and the 3 is positive. So that might be a little easier to see. Okay, so the opposite first thing we need to do is subtract 3 from both sides. And then we're going to divide by negative 4 and we get x equals